More hope for public servants looking to make their case against working 3 days in the office. A federal judge has ruled in favor of a full hearing on the Public Service Union's case to stop this plan in its tracks. The Treasury Board of Canada will have to explain to the court why it's moving from 2 days to 3 days. The unions for federal employees say most civil servants oppose the change, arguing they're more productive at home.
We're not looking for 100% full-time remote work. We're just looking for a fair process where each employee and each team and each department, you can come up with the best remote work policy, the best hybrid work policy, so that there's some flexibility and some fairness. That's what we're looking for.
We'll hear from the union shortly, but first, here to explain why senior public servants want workers back in the office is the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council, Christiane Fox. Hey, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming in on this Friday before a long weekend. So why do you believe public servants should be back in the office for 3 days a week? Tell me the rationale for that.
I think I would start by saying that many public servants have been in the office 5 days a week. We've got nurses in First Nations communities, we've got prison guards, et cetera. So I think we have to frame the conversation in the broader context of who we are as a public service. But I think we felt it is important to have people come into the office because we think that people working together, collaborating, working as teams can lead to better service delivery for Canadians, which is ultimately our objective.
Yeah, you know what some civil servants say, this is inconvenient for me. I have to now pay for parking, I have to pay for transit, I have to pay for lunches again, or make my own lunch. I'm used to maybe making my own lunch at home. There's also the question of logistics, some of them saying that there aren't enough desks at some of these government office buildings, maybe not enough technology to go around, computers and the like. What do you say to those workers who are raising some red flags about this return to work and some of the inconveniences that they will have to deal with by going back to the office 3 days a week?
Well, I would start by saying that change can be difficult for people, and we recognize that. And so I think that's why we gave a lead time of about 6 months to allow people to make different arrangements for their personal circumstances. And I think the other thing I would say is that, we have been paying very close attention to the details. Do we have the right accommodations for people? Do we have the right IT in place to support more people coming into the office? Do we have collaboration spaces? So collectively, as senior leaders in the public service, we've tried to address those issues. It doesn't mean that someone may not encounter an issue when they come back to the office, starting September 9th to a longer in-office presence to 3 days. But it does mean that there's been concerted efforts to try to solve those issues. And in circumstances where, a building may not be ready because it's undergoing construction, we're going to not rush people back in that context. We're going to be sort of sensitive to the realities of the particular organization.
So you're open to being flexible with some of the irritants that might pop up, some of the challenges that may arise, given that people haven't been, in many instances, necessarily working in the office for some time. I want to get you to react to the federal court as well today. They're saying that the Treasury Board of Canada has to make the case in court. They denied the Treasury Board's request to kind of throw out the union's challenge of this back to the office policy. How are you responding to the federal court tonight and their demand that you kind of make the case in court and explain your rationale for why workers should be in the office as opposed to being at home?
Mm-hmm. So I think absolutely conscious of the decision today and that there will be a full hearing and the Treasury Board and the government will be prepared to provide that analysis and how we got to the decisions that we got to. But I think we will still be proceeding with our in-office presence starting September 9th.
Are there any sanctions for people who don't go back to work 3 days a week? Are you planning any sort of punishment for people that kind of just thumb their nose at this plan?
So I think the majority of public servants will adhere to this direction. And I think that people want to comply with what their employer is asking them to do. They want to serve Canadians. And so in the instances where we may not have compliance, yes, of course, people have to adhere to the organizations and the direction of the Treasury Board. And our expectation is that they will do so. And if they don't, then we will take the steps, the appropriate steps to deal with that from a management to employer perspective.
I expect there's some people at home maybe screaming at their television right now saying, I work in the office 5 days a week. There's no such thing as telework for me. I don't get this sort of flexibility that the government is offering. They're only going from 2 days to 3 days a week in the office. What's your response to people who say this is all, frankly, a bit ridiculous, that there should be people working in the office? If they have an office job, you should be in the office. What do you say to Canadians who are tearing their hair out, frankly, maybe listening to this conversation?
So I think I would say I'm sensitive to it. I think the perception of the public service is important for us. It goes to trust in institution, a confidence in their government, and so we are sensitive to those comments. And I think our commitment to Canadians is doing to have service excellence. And so what I would say is we have a commitment to hybrid. We recognize that in a post-pandemic environment, there are benefits to a hybrid workplace. And so what we're saying is we want to maximize that teamwork when people are together in the office while allowing for a little bit of that flexibility.
I noticed, I was doing some research today on what other governments have done in the United Kingdom. They've moved back to working in the office 60% of the time. In New South Wales, a state in Australia, they've actually moved back to 5 days a week for all public employees. They have to be in the office for that work period. Is that something the government is considering for its next step? I know you've got a bit of a challenge on your hands now with 3 days, but is it your intention to then eventually move to 5 days a week in the office?
I think what I would say is that ever since the pandemic, where we had to pivot and go to telework 100% in a crisis moment, we've been evaluating sort of how the benefits of the hybrid workplace, the challenges, how we can address some of those challenges. And I would argue that we constantly look at our work models so that we can be as high performing as we can be, and we'll continue to do that evaluation.
I mean, I assume you live in Ottawa.
I do.
And as you walk around downtown, you notice that a lot of buildings, abandoned businesses have left. The downtown core is, in many instances, hollowed out. There's just not a sense of vibrancy in many places because public servants are not working in the office. Does the government take any responsibility for the state of affairs here in downtown Ottawa? And do you think that maybe you will have to adjust your labor policies to bring some life back into the downtown core? Are you sensitive to that issue?
Of course we're sensitive. I'm sensitive as an Ottawa resident, but I think the motivation to bring people back is for us to be at our best for our public service. And that was really the driver. And of course, more activity downtown, more people coming into the office has other benefits, but I would say that the decision was about who we are and how we perform. And I think I've heard a lot of employees say, I'm more productive at home. I can do more of my cases as an immigration officer from home. And I'm not going to counter that. But I think I played basketball at Carleton University, and I use a basketball analogy. I could shoot a basketball in my driveway every day and become a better shooter. But if I don't practice with my team, we're not going to be able to win. And I think there's a parallel to the workplace. There is some things that we need to do together, complex challenges that are between sectors and departments, between other government departments, between other levels of government. And I do think that being together in the office has huge benefit to our performance.
I know the union obviously is pushing back strongly against this, but you mentioned some public servants have been in the office. Some people are working 5 days a week in the office. They're not necessarily opposed to a policy like what you're implementing because they already do it. Do you have an estimate of how many people are actually keen to work in the office and how many people are really reluctant to do that? Have you done any surveys of your people?
Yeah, I think each organization has done that type of analysis within their departments, but I know that, young public servants, there are a lot who see the benefit of coming into the office so that they can see how their leadership responds to different challenges, learning by observation. That's a part of your public service career development. It's part of values and ethics in the public service and being part of the broader democratic system. And so I think that every department has had discussions, town halls, they've got data. There is pockets of resistance, but I would not say it's across the board.
I wanted to ask you too about the size of the public service because I was looking at some of the census data today. There's been about a 35% increase in the number of public servants in 2015, so quite a sizable increase, whereas the population has only grown about 14%. So we've added public servants at twice the population growth rate over the last 9 years since this government was elected. There's now about 367,000 public servants. How do you justify that kind of explosive growth? Why have we added so many bodies to the public service?
Well, I think that we've got to look at what the country has gone through over the last few years. We were in a global pandemic where we were accelerating a number of programs and services to Canadians, and we got into areas of the country's programming or economic circumstances that perhaps in a pandemic or not a pandemic environment we may not have. So the growth can respond to that. The growth can respond to the role of the public service. But we are always conscious of do we need to right-size organizations? Are we fit for purpose? Are we nimble enough? These are all things that are very much top of mind as we look at how we execute to serve Canadians.
Yeah, I asked because the federal budget, the most recent one, announced that the government would cut about 5,000 positions over the next 4 years. Is there room to cut more? Is there room as positions pop up as people retire and there's attrition? Is there room to go a bit further than 5,000?
I think this is something that we constantly look at in terms of the size of the public service and what it is that we are being asked to perform. And I think that calibration happens in a very active discussion amongst senior leaders in the public service.
All right, thank you so much, Deputy Clerk Chris Fox. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective.
Well, thanks for having me.
Here to tell us why the union doesn't want some of its workers back in the office is Alex Silas, National Executive Vice President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Hey, Alex, thanks for coming on.
Hi, JP, thanks for having me.
So what's your reaction to the federal court judge saying today the government has to lay out its case in court? They did not throw out your request to review this mandate or to throw this mandate out necessarily. They're giving you a hearing. What's your reaction to the judge kind of siding with you?
Well, it's good news. It's certainly promising news. And this hearing and why we filed this federal court application is to force the government to finally show their cards, right, and have some accountability to workers that have been kept in the dark. They've said a lot of nice words. They've used a lot of fancy terms like collaboration and teamwork and culture and all this stuff, but they haven't really shown any evidence as to why they're doing this remote, this new return to office mandate. Our data shows that remote work has been a huge benefit for the federal public service, not just for the workers in the federal public service and their work-life balance and their lives at home, but their morale at work too. And at the end of the day, they've been more productive in a lot of cases through remote work. So we have a solution here, and we're turning it into a problem with this mandate with no real reason. So we're looking forward for the government to have to show up to court and show the receipts. Why are they forcing this mandate?
Do you have receipts to show that it's been more productive?
Yes, we've done studies and we've heard from our members who are happier in their works, who feel more productive in their works. And the data shows that throughout 2020 and 2021, throughout the pandemic and the lockdown, federal public service workers the productivity has maintained. In a lot of cases, they've been more efficient at doing their jobs. We know that the way that we work has to change, right? The nature of work has changed, and we look at other countries like Australia, who are frankly leading the way right now with the future of telework. We would like to see a Canada that has, and a federal government that has more vision and also wants to lead the way with the future of work, which includes telework for the jobs that can be done through remote work.
You mentioned Australia. In New South Wales, one of the largest state there, they're actually requiring their public servants to go back to the office for 5 days a week. They're not actually offering a telework option. Are you fearful that that's an example that the federal government could emulate? Because right now they're moving from 2 to 3 days in the office. Are you worried they could go to 5?
Well, for us, it's never been about the number of days. It's not about 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. It's about respecting the agreement that we had in the last round of bargaining, which was to develop joint committees for each department, each agency, to develop telework policies that work best for all of those different departments and for each team. A one-size-fits-all solution, it's like a one-size-fits-all t-shirt. It doesn't work. It doesn't fit.
What do you say to those people at home who are private sector workers who are not, or even public sector workers who are in the office 5 days a week, who are like screaming at their TV right now, being like, what do you mean going back to work for 3 days? That's going back to the office for 3 days. That's not such a big deal. What do you say to those people who are frustrated with people like you who are making these arguments that they should be able to work at home forever?
Right. Look, we represent blue-collar workers in the federal public service. We represent frontline workers, emergency workers, trades workers, border service officers, healthcare workers. I myself, I'm a security officer, right? A lot of jobs can't be done working from home. But for the office jobs that can be done working from home, it is an advantage, not just for those teams, but for the federal public service as a whole. And let's also remember that in the pandemic, it wasn't an option. You weren't offered the possibility to work from home. You had to work from home, and you had to adapt, and you had to figure out how to do your job from your kitchen table or from your home office. And workers in the federal public service figured that out, and they continued providing services to Canadians, and we've seen the benefits. There's potential benefits to our environment. There's potential solutions to the housing crisis from embracing remote work instead of pushing back against it. And also, in terms of workers in other sectors, telework could be the future for a lot of those sectors as well. The government of Canada is the largest employer in the country. They should be leading the way, and they should be showing some vision and some capacity to adapt to the future of work.
Are you not concerned about the prospect of two classes of workers, though, right? People who have the right to work at home and have this telework option, and everybody else. Is it not undermine labor solidarity even to have people who have this great lifestyle working from home and others who have to trudge to work every day and work in the office for 5 days a week? Do you not see how that might breed resentment, and maybe people might be more antagonistic towards the public service knowing that people are not in the office for 5 days?
I definitely see a lot of rhetoric out there that is seeking to sow that division, right? But I think, I think what most folks are looking at their TV and yelling and pulling their hair out is the flip-flopping on the part of this government. There was at one point they were pro-telework, it was the way of the future for the federal public service. Now they're walking that back. I think there's a lot of advantages for workers who have to do their job in person by embracing telework as well. The average commute for a Canadian is 17 hours a week. 8 hours a week. That translates to 17 days a year that you're just on the road commuting to work, that you're away from your family, you're away from work, you're away from your community. That number is just going to increase if we arbitrarily put more cars on the road just to do this return to office for no real reason. It's more cars on the road, longer commutes, it's bad for the environment. There are net advantages for everyone in embracing remote work.
What do you say to Chris Fox, who says that it's nice to have that camaraderie in the office, that teamwork is better in person, that some of these complex files are better worked on together in the office, that it's not just, you can't just go on Teams or GChat or what have you, like it just isn't working in her instance. She says that there's some problems with this. What do you say to people like that?
It's a great concept, but it's not the reality of how this return to office is looking right now. What it's looking like is workers are being asked to drive to the office. They're not going to their desk. They're having to reserve a desk for that day. They're not sitting next to people who are working on the same projects they're working on, not in the same teams. And they're going at this desk, they're opening their laptop, and they're logging into the same Teams meeting that they would be logging in if they were working from home. So it's a great concept, but again, it's a lot of words, and it's not what we're seeing in practice. The data backs up that remote work works.
Why do you think they're pushing it then? Why, if you have the data, why is the government so intent on getting you back into the office?
That's a great question. I'd love to know. We've been asking them that since they announced this mandate, and that's precisely why we filed this federal court application to force the federal government to present evidence as to why they are forcing this. And it's also going to give us, PSAC, an opportunity to present our data and our evidence in the courts that shows that this is misguided.
Have you walked around downtown Ottawa? I'm sure you've seen things aren't great down here. A lot of buildings hollowed out. There's a lot of businesses that have packed up and moved on. A lot of small businesses haven't been able to make it work because a lot of civil servants aren't here in the downtown. Is that something you're concerned about, or is that for somebody else to worry about?
Yeah, well, look, I live in Vanier. I love my downtown community. I think downtown communities, urban communities definitely need supports. That's the job of the city and the mayor's office, to come up with real solutions to support downtown communities and downtown businesses. And that shouldn't just be thrown on the backs of federal public service workers. It's simply not a real solution.
Okay, sounds good. We'll leave it there. Alex Silas, National Executive Vice President of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective.
Thanks so much for having me.